Hi guys, this is the section on the Transformative Multicultural Training in EMS Education I developed as our final project for the program. Hope you guys like it. So EMS professionals are required to work in a myriad of uncontrolled environments at times when people are experiencing the worst day of their lives. And these patients and their families come from all walks of life, and we must be able to meet their needs and advocate for them without the influence of our own bias. So the theoretical framework was created based on several different models together. Villegas and Lucas, Ladson and Billings, Banks, Nieto and Bode, and even Salazar. Those were the ones that I kind of took their information and built the program based on that, and I'll go into each one of those as we move forward. So the instructional design is kind of created in a spiral kind of design over a 16-month period. It's embedded within the entire program. We will be revisiting concepts that we learn, and we're going to build upon those concepts. So each time they come back to a component, we will reinforce it and then build upon it. And then it's going to all culminate at the end with an internship that will empower communication skills, hopefully improve research and advocating for change. And I'm going to apologize because my dog's wanting to sit with me here. Preparation begins with me. So I expect as an instructor to take an introspective look into who I am as a person to make sure that I can uphold receptive viewpoints on diversity, develop sincerity as a role model to encourage collaborative learning in a safe environment that is open to critical analysis with materials and resources that have been determined to be appropriate to meet the objectives of the curriculum. Ultimately, the implementation cannot be successful without an understanding and respect for individual differences in the classroom. I need to be able to show support for transformations and champion the threads that unite our students as a social group as a whole. And this is the part where Villegas and Lucas came into play, part of their model. So when we begin Unit 1, we've split these, or me, myself, and I, have split this into 4 units in total. The first unit is in week 2, and it's the definition of social identity and culture, and we're using Clucone, and I probably didn't pronounce that right. Discussion on conceptual frameworks for diversity that's based on the readings that we picked up in class from Adams, and we're going to work on the same personal identity wheel that we had to go through class. I think it's a good way to get them started. Then that's going to move us into a discussion on the social construction of differences and how that oppression affects us. And then we'll have a guided discussion after that topic has been delivered. So we're going to look at who shapes the self-concepts and norms. So we're going to kind of address that to the students. Describe incidents where role models may have defined messages of discriminatory socialization to us. List or describe the types of institutions that support or contradict our understandings, our earliest understandings, and how we can actually step out of that cycle of oppression. So we will be including that in as well. And then the students will go home that day with the project to identify 5 items from their culture. So when they come back to class as a collective group, they're going to look at their cultural profiles with their classmates and explore the meaning of each of the items. And that is going to lead into a discussion on Weaver's cultural iceberg, where we talk about the complexity of that culture and how it's embedded into the very nature of our existence, and we take that for granted. And then we're going to kind of segue off to develop a definition of what the term ethics and values mean. And then after that, the students are going to get several index cards with different values typed on each one. And the class, they'll have to sit down and pick 10 values that they connect with the most as individuals. Then I'm going to ask them to reduce that list to 5 and have them order it in level of perceived importance, what they feel is most important. And then once they're finished, everyone will cycle around the room to review what the values of their classmates found important to them. Each person will list their values at the bottom of the identity wheel worksheet that we went through, and I'm also going to participate in this project just so that the students can see what my values are and what my cultural wheel is as well. So the next step in that process is to expose the students to our project that's called the I Care Code of Ethics. It stands for integrity, compassion, accountability, respect, and empathy. And it's actually something that was adopted from a program out west under the direction of Chris Liebador of the I Care Code of Ethics for EMS providers. And this is going to be the basis or a guide for how all the student behaviors throughout the program is going to be evaluated. So this is that symbol. And to make that a collaborative effort for this symbol, the group is going to work together as a class to define and provide examples for each word. When it's complete, then we will put the poster up in the classroom, and that's going to be a constant reminder of the expectations for their behaviors and their attitudes. And then this will kind of segue into the discussion where we're going to ask them about the characteristics and attributes that you would expect an EMS provider or an EMS professional to have, and how the ethics, the attributes, and characteristics, as well as our own personal values, actually link us together as a social group or an EMS culture. At week 6, they're going to take a closer look at therapeutic communication and establishing rapport to improve interpersonal or interviewing skills with respect to cross-cultural differences and advocating for social justice in cases that are revolving around inequity. This project will be delivered through EMS case studies for various patient encounters where the students are going to be asked to participate in a scenario that requires them to establish appropriate rapport, interviewing skills, also appropriate body language and gestures. To explain this project in more detail, the class will be placed into a small group of 2 to 3 people per group. One person is going to take on the persona of the individual described in the case, while the other 1 or 2 students will work through a patient assessment to establish the chief complaint and identify the needed treatment. It might be necessary to give these guys about 15 minutes to research into the culture if it is not explicitly identified on the cue cards, or if they feel like they want to take it a step further and learn a little bit more. So we want to give them enough time to do that. I've given on the PowerPoint here, you can see the list of just various EMS cases, including HIV, cerebral palsy, all the way down through PTSD, morbid obesity, and even our sex offenders that may be calling us for medical care. So upon completion, the entire class is going to reconvene as a group, and those who participated as patients will provide feedback on their experiences as it relates to the persona and any perceived bias or concerns in care that was noted by them. And while the simulated EMS provider will describe any areas of difficulty identified and what methods they used to overcome those problems. This should lead into a nice seamless transition into a presentation and kind of a deliberation on attitudes toward cultural differences and migrating from ethnocentrism to ethno-relativism, which of course is influenced by Bennett. Learners will discuss how intercultural sensitivity or insensitivity can affect the ability to care for our patients. What steps can you take as an EMS provider on the job to leave any remaining biases of your own outside of your work environment, and really just open a discussion to see if those biases can indeed truly be left outside of the workplace, how we would go about adjusting or dealing with these issues. As a follow-up to this dialogue, the students will be asked to write an introspective journal entry that's kind of highlighting their attitudes based on Bennett's model toward cultural differences after the group project that they did today. So they're going to take a hard look at their identified values, the program's code of ethics, describe whether their attributes and characteristics meet the expectations of an EMS professional in order to provide care to a diverse society. If the learner feels that they are not prepared yet, this is also the time in the journal where we will have them ask them how they are going to work or outgrow or overcome those particular issues that they may have uncovered. These journals will be collected and then I will privately review them. So Unit 3 is delivered during the second semester, and it introduces care for our disabled patients and also methods for interaction with those that are experiencing behavioral emergencies. The lecture here is going to be based on ableism that was described by Adams, page 461 through 474, if you're curious. The questions to be considered during this lecture presentation is, what does it mean to be disabled? Can they name the categories of disability or what categories can be identified? In what ways have you seen ableism or disability oppression occur in the communities that we currently serve? And in what ways could we deliver disrespect in our interactions with these patients? One of the things I always talk about is for our geriatric patients is we have a bad tendency to use ageism terms such as honey or sweetheart. Those are derogatory terms, and we should respect our elderly generation by calling them Mr. or Ms. as the case may be until they tell us that they want us to interact with them. I'll just call me Jack, whatever it may be. But that's one of the ways that we can bring this into the conversation. And just to kind of pick up on some of the things that I didn't realize until taking this class, but the telethons and those charitable events, are they perpetuating oppression? So we'll kind of ask those questions, and hopefully all of this will conglomerate or just connect in with our guest speaker from the Coordinating Council for Independent Living, who's going to round out that presentation and provide feedback on current versus preferred methods to interact with a variety of patients that are experiencing behavioral emergencies. So this could be anything from an autistic child that needs to be cared for. It could be, the case of someone who has not taken their medication and they're having their schizophrenia has kicked in. So looking at the best ways to approach those individuals and how to make that interaction the most medically appropriate. So once we get done, the students are going to reflect on the underserved and oppressed cultures in our region. I'm going to provide them with a list of community partners that the learners can then decide, which group they want to complete their internship and the research requirements with. We have access to not only the Women's Shelter, but also to the Raleigh County Commission on Aging, the School of Deaf and Blind for West Virginia. There are several different things that we can look at, and the student may also suggest a location for pre-approval if they would prefer to go somewhere else. We can definitely look into that, but we want to try to limit to no more than 2 students per community partnership. So Unit 4 is really kind of a capstone service learning project that's held in that 3rd semester, and it's based on the local organization of choice that those students chose, and that's to try to ensure that future paramedics have the skills, sensitivity, and interest in working within the diverse communities, and that this is based off of the discussion from Salazar and in her work that she wrote. The student will maintain a journal for each day that they have went and provided service, and they're going to complete a reflection paper at the end of the internship. So the journals are going to be based on some of the suggested questions by Salazar. That's going to include how does your how does your perspective differ from that of the community partner? What are the social, cultural, economic, and even possibly the political issues that affect that population, and what do you perceive as the cause of these matters? Now, in order for our students, for the paramedic program to meet the required skill competencies, we're going to ask them to interview members of that minority group with respect to HIPAA or the privacy laws, patient privacy laws, and we want them to collect the following information. We want to know their age, their past medical history, meds, allergies, look at them toward their social interactions, the familial interactions, what if any physiological concerns they may have, and how often do they require medical services in the form of ambulance transport, and kind of explain a little bit about that so we can get a better perspective. Maybe this particular group has a certain medical condition that requires them to be transported by ambulance more often. There could be a good opportunity there for us to enhance or make that situation better or understand it better. So at the end, we've got this reflection paper that's going to have questions that were suggested by Salazar, and we are going to include a few of our own. So what have you learned about yourself from the experience? Do you feel that you are in the same stage of Bennett's model of ethno-relativism now that you've completed the project? I want them to try to explain where they feel like that is, if they feel like they've made some progress. What realities and injustices does this particular group face? What research could we initiate to try to assist this group or to try to help the wrongs that we were identifying? And then in what ways can we advocate for these members within the culture while we're working on the ambulance as an EMS provider? So one primary limitation that could impact the quality of the program is going to include the time constraints to complete the expected behavioral outcomes. Also, there is a concern for those that may be transferring into the program, since other colleges do not require multicultural education because there is no state mandate for it. My concern is that those transfer students coming in would not get the full benefit of the education that we would be providing. A minor obstacle is going to be making sure that we have a sufficient number of articulation agreements with a variety of community partners. And we also need to gain the approval of the advisory board to replace the clinical internship hours with this project. That could be a larger hurdle. However, this can be justified. We could do documentation with the patient assessments through that interview process. We also want to look at the best method to gain their support to initially to initially offer the capstone in the form of bonus work to the students in the first year, so we can kind of collect data to provide that validity or that reliability of doing the project toward their career as EMS professionals. But by initiating this curriculum and collecting the reliable data, it's going to be possible to petition the state to mandate multicultural education to be embedded within the initial and continuing education courses for EMS professionals, and that's going to help sustain the curriculum. And in turn, I think this is going to provide a huge vehicle for change in the delivery and advocacy for more empathetic patient care providers. So, the assessment and evaluation for effectiveness will occur through careful investigation of the service learning activity journals. We're going to look at the reflection papers, the patient interview information, and we're also going to initiate some post-course surveys that will be delivered not only to the graduates but also to the employers, and include a specialized section where we're requesting follow-up data on the learning event and see if it had an impact on the learner and their career. So the aim is that in using the combination of models, which also includes Sleater and Grant's human relations approach to promote unity, tolerance, and acceptance, that we can improve communication and generate a positive behavior based on experience. And that kind of links back into the discussion with Spradley. The objective is to require the students to articulate their cultural influences, their bias, their attitudes and beliefs regarding multicultural issues, increase the knowledge of basic theories, recognize and employ culturally sensitive strategies and skills, and hopefully increase in cultural awareness of diversity and social justice. But ultimately, at the end of this entire product, we want to provide, or I want to provide, a vehicle for change in the delivery and advocacy of more empathetic pre-hospital patient care providers. That's ultimately the goal. And so here's my list of references. I'll look forward to hearing what everybody else put together, and have a great day.